Hi, welcome. It's lovely to have you joining us as we'll just have a little moment or so as people are arriving, and we'd love to hear from you. Given the topic of this series about uncertainty and discomfort, what do you do when your students are frustrated in the face of uncertainty? So that little question is there in the chat. I believe it should be visible to you. I'll just repost it there in case it wasn't visible to you. If you want to take a moment as we're just arriving and landing, and also to bring your mind into focus of what we'll be talking about today, what do you do? So perhaps, when we say your students, that can be the students that you're responsible for, or any young people that you're interacting with if you're not currently teaching. What do you do when they're frustrated, when they're dealing with uncertainty? So if you're just arriving right now, we have a question in the chat about what do you do when your students are dealing with uncertainty, are expressing frustration about uncertainty. And so it's an opportunity to give your own response and to hear a little bit about what other people are doing as well.
Yeah, this is all great already. Listening, trying to unpack, understand the reason behind the frustration, acknowledging it's okay to feel frustrated, ask in more particular what they're finding challenging. It's good that they're seeing and dealing with uncertainty, they're doing things right. Listen, support, give a safe space, wait. Providing immediate relief is not a solution, that's maybe more a quick fix. Ask them to share, listen, support. Want them to learn skills for working with uncertainty, not to solve, remove, avoid it.
So lovely to have you with us this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are landing. So this is the last webinar in this series about discomfort and uncertainty. And we've got two authors here today. Johan will be doing the primary part of the presentation, and Johanna will be with us as much as her intranet allows her to be with us. So if you see her coming and going, don't take it personally. it's electrons that are not cooperating. So I'm very pleased. I'm really excited about the topic. Well, I've been excited about this entire series, but this particular topic of looking at the emotional aspects of uncertainty and about helping students manage the frustration and acknowledge the impact of coping with the uncertainty of not being exclusively cognitive, that there's also humans that we're dealing with here. And in this particular context, also about sustainability. So also about the planet and the range of living beings that are on this planet with us. So I'm going to hand over to Johan now. And I think Johan said he's got about 25-minute presentation. So that will allow us to continue this discussion that we've started in the chat here afterwards, and to hear more about how you're doing things, what you're doing, and how you might bring these ideas and concepts from Johan and Johanna's recent paper into your work and into your research. So Johan, I will hand over to you here. That's
perfect. Thank you so much. And it's very nice to be here. This is my first time participating in this series. So we're also very happy about the invitation and possibility to be here with you. And I think we already started a very nice conversation here in the chat. So if I don't manage the presentation, we can always feel safety in this group to have a good conversation on this topic, because I think that is interesting us a lot. My name is Johan Holmén, and I'm an assistant professor at University West in a small town outside Gothenburg in Sweden. And I will be sharing some work that I've been doing together with Johanna. And I think before I share the screen and the work, you could share with us also who you are.
Yes, thank you, Johan. My name is Johanna Lönngren, and I work at Umeå University, which is in the north middle of Sweden. And this study that Johan is presenting is part of our project on emotions in engineering education, especially when students work on wicked sustainability problems. And it's really great to be here.
Thanks, lovely. And the responsibility of this presentation is on me, but Johanna is also here to save us if something goes wrong. So let's see now. Now I'm sharing the screen, and is this working all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I see you nodding. So the title that we prepared for this presentation is Emotional Scaffolding for Dealing with Epistemic Emotions in Engineering Education. And this is fairly close to the title of a recent study we had published in the European Journal of Engineering Education on the topic, and that is what will work as a basis for the presentation. And then I still hope that we can even possibly broaden the conversation when we meet back in the big group after me having this presentation for you. And there are lots of E's in the titles here, and we've also been, I think, deliberately playing with that a bit in the way we've been setting the titles. So just a very quick zoom in on what we're doing here, so we can have that done. And this is nothing new, I think, for those of you here, but I have to say it for the sake of the presentation and the conversation. But we are educating towards futures that are essentially unknown and unknowable. So it's very difficult to know in advance exactly what our students should learn and what they should know in terms of content. But we have to leave this kind of radical openness into the learning and educational situations. Because we know that sustainability challenges and contemporary societal challenges in general and particular are complex, persistent. They involve often clashes of values and different agendas. We are undergoing socio-ecological transformations, rapid technological developments, inequalities, and all this that kind of shape and reshape the world as we know it. And this is something that we, of course, should not leave out of the education situation, but bring into the education situation. And this is what I think has interested both me and Johanna a lot. Like, how can you do good education and learning in these type of settings that are not these, neatly problems that can be formulated on one sheet by a teacher, and then you can control the learning process in a certain direction. But you need to kind of leave these type of open-ended aspects into the education learning situation. And also the experience is that when being confronted with wicked issues or when working with complex aspects, uncertainty is of course there. Emotions tend to be quite present in that type of learning, and I think we generally can say that, and this is typically not part of mainstream engineering education to bring emotions to the surface and to invite engineers to reflect on how emotions are influencing the way they deal with problems or influencing the way they learn. The normal way of doing it is to maintain in the analytical rational box where emotions is something that should not be there. But we know, of course, we who are in here, that long research in both the education learning sciences show that emotions cannot be separated from learning and are very much part of it. And that is what interested us in this work as well. And we will help you throughout this presentation to also unpack the concepts that we have here in the questions. But I will just read them out so you get a sense of what we're trying to combine in this work. And the first question is a more empirical descriptive one, when we try to understand how students enact emotions as they together grapple with epistemic challenges in sustainability learning contexts, which means that we do not study individual students, but we study how students in groups grapple with these type of challenges and focus on emotions in interaction that are kind of made through social interaction. And the second question is basically simply put about how can we support or enhance the type of desired learning we are after in that type of situation, so that it doesn't lead to breakdown or students just being frustrated and leaving the room, because that we don't, maybe we don't want that. And then we focus on emotional scaffolding and even emotional scaffolding systems. And I will come back to that concept, because that is also part of the, I think, contribution of this work. And we are focusing on expansive learning, which is a particular type of learning that made us be a bit more specific about the kind of learning theories we were drawing from in the study. So there is quite much in the questions. There is quite much in the paper. And it was quite much work to get it done, but it is, and it is at least possible to present it in the time, and I hope we can follow and understand what we've been trying to do here. So the empirical basis for the study is that we have video recorded with ethical approval student group work on wicked sustainability problems at 2 different universities in Sweden. And these groups, the videos we've had has been 3 meetings per group, and the meetings have been between 1.5 and 4 hours of video material for each group. And you see there are in total 4 groups. So there are quite many hours of video material that we have been going through. And then with the help of some sensitizing concepts, we have selected a small amount of, or a fairly small amount of excerpts, which are between 30 and 120 seconds long, where basically something interesting seemed to happen that were worthy further inquiry. But that selection process is described further in the paper, and we can get back to that also in the discussion if you're curious to learn more about that. But that was quite much work to go through the data and select excerpts for this further analysis in what type of epistemic challenges were they facing, what type of emotions were at play there, and why would those situations be interesting to study from a learning perspective. And that is what we will guide you through now. So the type of analysis we do with this type of data is a multimodal analysis, which means that we are working with what is being said, but also generally sounds that are made by students in these situations, facial expressions, gestures, body positions, gaze, interaction with physical and material artifacts, because they're typically dealing with either computers or post-it notes, flip charts, pens. They often have snacks and so on. So there's quite much material interaction in the videos as well that are interesting to analyze. And for each out of these 18 excerpts, we mapped what type of emotional expressions could we observe and identify in relation to the type of epistemic challenges that students were confronted with. And I'll go through a bit more what challenges we identified. And then we could map, with all these 18 excerpts, we could also map, okay, here is a challenge, for example, ambiguity, and that is present in, let's say, 13 out of the 18 excerpts. Then we could see what different emotions were at play when students confronted ambiguity, also in different types of situations and groups. So we could use that as an ordering object in the data. And this is just a nice modified picture of what it can look like when one student group works. And you can see the camera tripod in the back here from one of the cameras, and then of course you have another camera. So there are 2 cameras in the room and microphones to capture that. And in the paper, also because of lack of space in a journal article, we could not describe all the 18 excerpts and analyze them in depth. So we selected a few to go more in depth in the analysis, and this is to give you a little feel of what type of data and empirics are we talking about here. So the activities that we worked with is that basically the group discusses responses from a survey they sent out as part of their sustainability project, and they started to laugh about the particular response that came up in the survey. And the second activity is a group working to figure out how can we reduce the production of electronic waste on our campus. And the third activity that we have with another group is into a conversation on the difficulty of valuating environmental and social assets economically. And the fourth activity is students exploring the reasons for why old electronics are not thrown away. And you can see that this is the same group as the one working on electronic waste on campus. And what type of challenges or emotion objects were observed in these situations? And I will not go through it in detail, but you can see here that it is about risk of failure and losing face, value conflict, ambiguity, uncertainty, dealing with unknowns, the limits of rationality when trying to put an economic valuation on something that is very social or value laden. And so forth. And here are the primary enacted emotions in those situations. So you can see in the first 2, it's all about amusement and contempt, but a bit of a difference in the type of challenges they were facing. Whereas in the second 2 groups or activities here, you see that the education challenges are the same, but the primary enacted emotions are different. And then you can maybe suspect that there is a 4th row here, or 4th column in this table, which is about what does this mean for learning. But I can't show you that one before we have gone through some more work that we did in order to make that column. So that will be a little cliffhanger, and you will have to join in on the ride now before we show you the last column. So this is just to basically show you the type of maps that we created for the different excerpts. You can see with if you are able to see these colors, you can see that we have the educational challenges here to the right-hand side, uncertainty and knowability, risk of failure. You have a general description of what is kind of in the center of the situation, and also what students say or do, and what type of emotions are being enacted in that situation. So, and this is marked with, you know, arrows and boxes and color and whatever. And those can be found in the paper if you want to engage with them more. But and all of these also involve a narrative description of the particular situation. But I encourage you to look into the paper if you want to see those more. But these are kind of the maps that we created for each situation that we analyzed. But going back to the research question, enacted emotions and epistemic challenges is what I will be going through first now. And epistemic challenges in sustainability learning, we worked with those 7, I think we ended up with. It was 8 at some point also, but I think it's those 7 that we ended up with. And this is just for you to get a little understanding of what type of challenges that we could observe in the material. Lack of knowledge, uncertainty that could not be dealt with or reduced, ambiguity, limits of rationality, contextual dependencies, and also risk of failure and lack of time also were very present in many of the selected excerpts. So get a sense of just what type of epistemic challenges were part of the data material. And when it comes to the enacted emotions, we have already hinted at for you. We worked primarily with epistemic emotions associated with a particular learning process in kind of making sense with analyzing, understanding, dealing with a particular problem or task in a group. So it was kind of that type of emotions that we worked with here. For example, frustration about uncertainty, which we also primed a bit in the beginning of this webinar. And we mapped the type of emotions that we observed. So here you can see if you lean your head, you can see that these are the emotions, enacted emotions towards the challenge of lack of knowledge. And you can see here if you go left or right, it is either framed as a negative or a positive emotion. And on the vertical axis, you can see if it is something that is kind of low or high in what should I say, in energy. If it is like something that is intense or not very intense, then you have low or high activation. And this is from a framework, but we filled it with our data. And this you can also find in the paper, what type of emotions were part. And as you see here, there is not any kind of claim about whether a negative or a positive emotion is good or bad for learning, or whether low or high activation is what you should go for. So this is general descriptive, and we leave that open, the type of assumptions we might hold about here, what is good or bad for learning, and for whom and what type of learning. And the second question, which will then guide us towards the final conclusions from this paper, we're talking about emotional scaffolding to kind of support or enhance the type of learning we are after if we are seeking expansion in this context. And expansive learning is some of you, I guess, are already familiar with this work, but it is basically about learning what is not yet there, or the creation of novelty in light of a contradictory or problematic situation where you are broadening or transforming the object you're working towards and possibly yourself in your activity. And the key emphasis here is how transformative agency is being generated in the learning process, where learners take increasing control over their own direction and pace of what they're doing out of the hands of the instructor, or maybe what was the kind of intended purpose of the activity. And we use this to be a bit more particular within this, encompassing transformative learning paradigm, and also to complement metaphorically this idea of learning by acquisition and learning by participation. But there is yet again more in the paper if you want to see how we worked with it and more particularities. And to not make things easier for us, we also chose to go beyond conventional ideas of scaffolding as just being about the relationality between an expert and a learner, into viewing scaffolding as something distributed and as a system, which we think worked quite well when we were working with social interactions and group work and material from group work, primarily when teachers were not in the room. So then we worked with some recent developments into scaffolding to kind of acknowledge it, because you could argue that it has always been acknowledged, but now it was really acknowledged that scaffolding is distributed and can be viewed as a system that is made through various type of activities and tools for kind of the entire wider learning environment. And then, of course, we were focusing primarily on emotional aspects of scaffolding in this work. And, you know, scaffolding is always there, and we can view scaffolding as a complex system. And this is one, I think, contribution of the paper, and that is like, if we start talking about scaffolding as a system, we can take these classical definitions of systems as an interconnected set of elements coherently organized in a way that it achieves something. And I think this is quite close to a dictionary definition of a system. And if you look at that, you can see that it contains three things: elements, interconnections, and a function or a purpose. And can a scaffolding system be said to contain those features? And we think it can, because there are social and material artifacts at play as kind of elements in these situations that we worked with. There are interconnections. Artifacts interact often through or with people, and through interactions and through relations in the learning situation studied. And there is definitely a functional purpose, and that is to support or enhance the desired type of learning. So likely we can analyze and even purposefully design scaffolding systems for our students or with our students in this type of learning environments. We can give lots of freedom and agency for students to regulate and work together through uncertainty and complexity, without dependency on the teacher to be there all the time and assume that role. So you can build that capacity through a scaffolding system with the group. So here comes the last column of the table. Learning processes and outcomes. What did these situations create? The first situation, when they were laughing on the survey response, it created cohesion, sense of us and them. They were ridiculing the content, but they also let go of the challenge and trying to really understand what was this survey response about. And it was ambiguous and it was some value clash, but they kind of just laughed it away, and they continued maintaining a nice feeling in the group. So there was little sign of actually expansion in using that survey response to start asking yourselves critical questions and possibly changing direction in the work. In the second one, we also had amusement and contempt, but there it rather created relationality, courage, the ability to stay with a complex challenge and also expand and taking a new path and daring to take that path together in the group and going with something that was suggested as maybe this might work. The third one, the conversation of the difficulty of evaluating economically and socially, produced disengagement. There was vulnerability present when the question was raised, but it also led to disconnection and the groups deciding to or not deciding, but they just did it, moving on in silence without really opening up that, just saying that, this is too difficult, this is beyond what we can do as engineers or whatever. So they're just moving on, which, maybe they missed out on that conversation. Whereas in the last one, you had the same type of challenge, but you instead had engagement as the enacted emotion, and then there was excitement towards discovery and continuous exploration, even into something that felt a bit like off in the beginning in the group. So the $1 million questions: what emotions are good for learning? And here we claim that it depends. The same type of emotional interaction can facilitate and hinder learning depending on context and situation and possibly other factors that we were not working with. Laughter can both ease tension, but it can also avoid engagement with the real task. Confidence can mean that we are kind of facilitating persistence to keep going in a group, but it can also shut off alternative approaches that are framed or presented in less confident ways. Worry can mean that you continue to explore because you are worried and want to find out, but it can also mean that you avoid engaging because you are worried. excitement can facilitate engagement, but it can also avoid critical reflection. So that's something that we found with evidence for, with support in our data and through the analysis, that there is not one emotion that is good for one type of learning, but it's more complex and multifaceted than that. And the second contribution here is, if we think about scaffolding a system, we can bring in our system toolbox. We can start talking about intervention or invitations to change those systems, and then we worked with leverage points as the idea here, from tweaking the type of learning environments, like build on the dynamic that is there, let students have fun and stimulate the type of engagement, into re-articulating the work to kind of normalize the challenges, reassure that this is the way to go. Uncertainty is part of this, as some of you were pointing towards in the chat, helping students deal with the negative emotions to kind of regulate them. But you can also work to reframe what situations come about here, reinterpret challenges and failure as actual learning opportunities here, and focus on what you actually can do in terms of agency. And we can come back with this later, but it's just a way to present some different type of strategies with different depth of implication in tweaking this type of learning environments. And then we present this little four-fielder in the work, in what type of challenges are they facing and how can they possibly be reframed. And we look at challenges that on the level of to what extent they can be controlled and to what extent they are familiar to engineering students in our context. And lack of knowledge, lack of time, relatively easy to scaffold on their own. Lack of knowledge, you can just search up more information. Lack of time, okay, we only have a few minutes, let's move on. Medium difficulty is when there are context dependencies. How do we deal with that, and how can we understand context? It also provides a possibility to be more concrete by relating your issue with a particular context. Uncertainty can be scary, but it's also fascinating that there may lie unknown possibilities that we are not aware of. Ambiguity opens up also possibilities to imagine. It can be understood differently. Let's imagine what we desire. And limits of rationality create possibilities to actually go outside or beyond the analytical frame and connect and create meaning, which might be the most difficult to reach with this group. So, to just summarize, the same type of emotional interaction can facilitate and hinder learning. We can't just scaffold the right emotions in a controlled manner. And we also see that students are diverse in the type of approach they take to particular epistemic challenges, which has implications, of course, for the type of learning, as you also saw briefly illustrated in the table that I presented. And lastly, video data is incredibly rich. The possibility to engage with multiple senses beyond the spoken word was, for me, illuminating. But there is also, given the richness of the material, it is a real difficulty in choosing the right analytical focus and level, because you can work with so much. But also enriching learning, actually, what students do when teachers are not in the room in these group projects. But also what students have done for the last half an hour when a teacher comes into the room and asks, do you have any questions, or can I support with anything? And then you can try to see how the teacher tries to read the situation and how they try to support the group, which sometimes they do in maybe a wrong way when we have seen what the group has been into, which has also been quite insightful for us to be humble with where the students are. And we are working and doing further work. We're combining our insights on emotional scaffolding at group level with work on productive meta effect at individual level, together with Jessica Svensson, who you might be aware of at University at Buffalo, for example. So we keep doing this work because we find it fascinating and incredibly enriching. And I think you agree with that, Johanna. Some references and our email addresses. I put yours also, Johanna. I didn't ask you, but they can mail me if you feel occupied, but you can mail us both. And with that, thanks for taking the time to listen in, and I'm looking forward to joining in on the conversation now.
Thank you very much for the really interesting study that you've shared with us, with the really detailed analysis. I certainly have some questions. Yeah, there's definitely interesting insights that you've got here. But I'd like to invite reactions and questions from everyone. Oh, let me just try and see if I can. Sorry, I will try and paste. So my suggestions, perhaps, for some questions might be that you already have a specific question about the study. Oh, okay. It looks like I'm shouting in the chat, but that wasn't intentional. I don't know why it came out like that. So maybe you've got some specific questions about the study. Maybe you've also got some thoughts about your work with students about sort of connecting more to our warm-up question about how are you and your students working with uncertainty and sustainability and emotions. And then maybe the third step of thinking about what you're doing and what we've just heard about from Johan and Johanna, where might that go next? What questions or ideas do you have about that? So those are some suggestions about what you might be thinking about, what we might like to hear about. I believe you should see at the top of your Teams interface a little purple hand. And if you have a question, if you click on that little raise your hand button, then they will come out in order, which will make it easier for us to chair, to allow an opportunity for everybody. So do we, you're of course also welcome to ask a question in the chat if that works better for you, to type in your question, and we'll make sure that there's an opportunity to address that. If there aren't any questions immediately, I'll ask while other people are thinking. I was really interested to see that the same type of initial emotional reaction can lead to really different outcomes in terms of how people are engaging with it. And I wondered if you saw any aspects of temporality in that when, like, did it have to do with the psychological safety in the group? Did that when that discomfort came up early in the group, or at moments when the group was particularly tense or under deadline, were they more likely to push back from that, to not engaging with it? And moments where the group sort of knew each other better, or were in a place where they were like, this is the real working period, we can really engage with it, were they more likely, when there weren't external pressures, were they more able to deal with, to take on the discomfort constructively rather than to be stepping away from it?
Would you like to talk, Johanna? Since your internet connection seems to be working now, so I give you the space.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I don't think we've looked at the temporal dimension, but because we do have very different contexts in the two courses that we look at. In one of the courses, the students actively are trained to work together and to listen to each other and to build a safe space. In the other course, they are just kind of thrown into the exercise. And the examples we have from where they are actually engaging, where the laughing more helps to support the group in positively working forward with a challenge, are from the group where they have worked on the emotional safety. And the example where they just kind of laugh at outsiders, at stupid people, that's from the group that was just thrown into the task. That doesn't say anything about correlation, but it's just what our data was like.
Yeah, no, do you want richness, or do you want the correlation? But that does seem to be and related very much to the emotional scaffolding that you're talking about those broader contexts that allow students to be working with that discomfort constructively.
I'd be curious to hear if people have used strategies that don't fit in our table and models. What have we missed that you all are using? and doing in your classrooms or your students are doing.
Can we see the slide again with your table? With the table that had column 4 that came late, to be able to see that nice mapping of those strategies and responses?
You mean this one?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you can see the B groups, B2 and B1. They were the ones that were more less safe with each other. It's more trying to build the group safety first and then engage with the learning.
And with the B group, we also observed that especially one of the groups, they were hiding a lot behind their computer screens. So there was not much interaction happening, but they were sitting individually behind computer screens, and we don't know what they did on the screens, but possibly dividing the tasks between themselves and doing it and then compiling it. And we also had, as part of the work, we also had reflection sessions with the teachers of the courses where we reflected on them, what we had observed and what we had seen. And then we gave as a recommendation to try to support the students in not hiding behind computers, but give them more artifacts on the tables that they can work with, because then you have that kind of interaction and engagement. So do that. Otherwise, they will be more. Then they could as well have been digitally meeting and dividing the work without sitting together. So we suggested that for the next round of the course, if that is what was wanted, to support kind of the group work as well on this aspect. So that was also part of that we're hiding behind screens.
There, I'll let you read Matt's comment directly in the chat.
Hello, Johanna. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Sorry, I can't turn my mic on as I am in a shared office. I have a quick question regarding the coding of valence activation in the 2D plane you've shown. I found it really interesting that surprise was in the center of the plane. Is that part of theoretical background, or was it an analytical decision, and why? Best, Matt. Okay. I think this goes for you, Johanna, again, because you are the ones who did the mapping on the valences.
Yes, I don't remember exactly what the picture looks like, but surprise, it ended up at a neutral position because students could be surprised in positive or negative ways. So they could express negative facial expressions or verbal expressions when they were surprised. And they could also be positively surprised when they found something that they then thought, oh, this is really exciting, we should go on with this. And surprise, at least in the way the students expressed it, was not this super active, but also not super inactive. So that's why it ended up in the middle.
It's not the kind of movie surprise party reaction, but it's more like acting surprised or baffled by a situation. Yeah. But is that something you come across, Matt? If you're in your education, that students tend to be baffled and surprised, is that something you commonly come across? I was surprised. Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically the answer to your question, Matt, is we didn't know where to put it because it fit everything and nothing, so it ended up in the middle. And I guess another thing to take away from the analysis is that it was really hard to always just put one emotion, because it's always kind of a mix of different emotions they express at the same time or shortly after, and it's always a flow that's not really that easy to put in different categories. And we really tried to find this connection between what emotions they express and what kind of learning they can engage in. I spent a lot of hours trying to map that, but it just didn't work. So there is no clear connection, at least in our data.
Do you have any explicit statements from students about their perception of the negative positive valence that they put on encountering uncertainty, on whether or not they see uncertainty as a productive phase towards something, or as like, is it a sign that you're making progress, or is it a sign that you're heading in the wrong direction? How do they feel about uncertainty?
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. I would like to reformulate the question a bit, because we cannot say how they feel about uncertainty, but we can see what they do, and what emotions are kind of constructed in that type of interaction, and which of course can have some correspondence with what they're actually feeling inside themselves. But what we found there is that there are those who some students just go straight into it, like as some of you wrote here, like, yeah, it's supposed to be uncertain, and I don't know if this is the right way, but let's start somewhere. And the teacher also told us that's what we should do. So even if we don't feel secure if this is the right thing to do, let's do it. And there was even a statement of some group saying, hopefully the teacher comes and saves us soon enough if it goes really bad, so there was also this kind of presence of the teacher who were not in the room through that kind of statement.
But also an idea that the teacher should get them out of the uncertainty, not push them into uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So
yeah, that uncertainty wasn't the space they were supposed to be. Uncertainty meant that they were not being productive or constructive, that the teacher should come and get them back on track in the right way to get out of uncertainty. That if you are uncertain, then it means that you're So the analogy that I often use is about physical exercise. And that when you go to the gym and you feel, or you're outside hiking and you feel short of breath and you have some fatigue and discomfort in your muscles, you go, oh, I'm really working hard. It's uncomfortable. And I know that this is what my heart needs, that this is healthy for me to go through this discomfort. If I'm chopping vegetables and I'm encountering discomfort in my fingers, I know that that's a bad thing and I need to change it. When they're encountering discomfort from uncertainty, is their perception of, this knife is dangerous, I need to change what I'm doing, or, I'm developing muscle here, I'm going in a good direction, that this is a challenge and this is a sign that this is a constructive challenge because I have discomfort, or is it discomfort? So I'm in terms of that, I think that we get a lot of the messaging, and also in the way that we respond to students, also in small ways. When students say, I don't know what to do here, or I'm unsure, we say, let me fix that for you. Let me get you back into certain solid ground, rather than saying, yeah, great, okay, that means you're in it. If you're and they have decades of experience as students where teachers keep on hauling them on to solid ground, like that's the right place to be. Sorry, I'm occupying too much space. Thanks, Matt, for pointing out to me. Can we pop over to there's a Q&A from Jean Saunders?
Mm-hmm. And can I just quickly respond? Because what you're saying is exactly the point of the deep scaffolding. So they experience challenges, and then we help them, or they help themselves, or they help each other to reframe those challenges as opportunities for learning. So that's exactly the point of that deep leverage point, scaffolding.
Yeah, which is why your work is, it's so really interesting to be reading about. So the Q&A from Jean Saunders is she's asked, she is curious, for this or other studies where you have shared the results back with the students and gotten a reaction, confirmation, expansion on what was going on for them in these moments. I'm wondering what this type of reflection might uncover, maybe background experiences that might be informing their reactions to the group project. I think it's very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, yes, Jan. We offered all students participating a reflection and feedback session after we had gone through the material. So we did that, but that was 3 years ago now. We are also 2 years ago. So I don't have it in top of my head exactly what type of reflection that uncovered. But in general, what I remember is that they were very curious about the study and the work, and were happy to get the feedback. That's what I remember. And we also gave them some like encouraging feedback that they were doing very well in the groups. But I can't see any particular. Do you remember, Johanna, on that? Otherwise, we can compile it for the sendout if we go back to the notes from that meeting.
What I most remember from that is how they talked about the group process and the importance of building that psychological safety in the group. And they talked about it as kind of a paradigm shift for their group work. They had some problems in the beginning, and then they did all these exercises, and then they became like a completely different group that could do all these things, engage with uncertainty, propose things they weren't sure about, etc. So that I really remember. But I also want to add that we fed some of our results back to the teachers. So we met with the teachers, especially the leverage levels, and they found that very useful. And then they wanted to have even more concrete tools that they could use. So that's kind of where we're now trying out some concrete tools. The first ones we tried didn't work, so we continue.
Can you say a little bit about concrete tools for building psychological safety, concrete tools for the instructors around the scaffolding?
Yeah, we were starting with the scaffolding, and that didn't work. So now we're back to the psychological safety.
So a question from Stephanie Damas. Can you talk a bit more about how you identified which emotions were activated versus deactivated? I'm curious about your activation circle graphic. So maybe if you share back that slide again.
Yeah, and I know, Johanna, when you present this, you also present also like where this cycle comes from. So I will give this to you again to share what we mean by activated and deactivated here.
Yeah, so this comes from the activation valence theory of emotions, and the circle itself comes from a publication from 1980 from Russell that is used very widely, and many times we focus on these two dimensions, activation and valence of emotions, and then there's other frameworks that have a third dimension, which is about how powerful someone is experienced when expressing an emotion. So when you express anger, you're perceived as very powerful, or you can influence the situation. And when you express despair, you're less powerful. You can't influence the situation. So it's just different theories and models for talking about emotions from different perspectives, and this one is used very widely. And concretely in the analysis, it's a lot about how strongly they express with both words, but also with body language or facial expressions. Do they talk quietly? Do they talk louder? Those kinds of signs in the data.
So when I shouted in the chat here, I thought some of the things that people might want to discuss would be specific questions about the study. And we've certainly had several of those about wanting to know more about how you conducted the study and the models that they're based on. Maybe think a little bit, maybe the prompt around thinking about uncertainty, sustainability, and emotions in your own teaching context and your own interactions with students. And then thinking about that intersection between how has these ideas about emotions and about the scaffolding system informed how you might be thinking about supporting students in that going forward. We do have a couple more minutes here, probably in people's schedule, if you want to take advantage of having Johanna and Johan here.
Maybe I could just say a few words also about the material artifacts, because they didn't come out as strongly in Johan's presentation. Many times we saw that the students were fiddling with a lot of artifacts, and that seemed to provide them some kind of safety as well. Individually, they could hold on to something. But we also started to look at how they use the post-its, for example, where they have shared objects that they work with that also help to focus the conversation on a shared object, a material object that they can work around. So the artifacts in the room actually are very important for the learning environment and for the psychological safety as well. And that's a really interesting perspective on the scaffolding system, that it's so much more complex than we traditionally think in research terms. But when we're in the classroom, of course, we look at all of those things without knowing that we have all that complexity that we care about in the situation. There's a question.
And there's one more question from Matt's in the chat there.
How to support teachers, ourselves and others for dealing with epistemic emotions, some take-home message. Yeah, I think this goes back again from what we had in the beginning. I think a lot can be won by making putting words on the emotions and making students know early on that these emotions might come up, and that is part of the learning that we are after here, so that it doesn't come as a surprise, because sometimes these emotions don't happen in other courses. So that you have won a lot if you just show these are the type of epistemic emotions that you might come across in this type of coursework or in this type of project. And go through the list, and you could even have a conversation about, do you have experiences with coming across these type of emotions in various instances of your life, you know? So that type of exercise helps a lot in making them a bit more familiar. You know, you get to know these emotions a bit better and how you react or respond with them, and how you can deal with them in a group. That is one part of it, I think. And then it is also that you can think through what type of epistemic emotions are key for the type of learning that we are after here in this type of course or in this type of coursework, and how do I ensure that we can design collectively tasks and instruction and the learning environment where these epistemic emotions have a good environment to flourish in the way we want them to work. Without socially engineering them, we can try to think about what emotions are important and what epistemic emotions do we want to come through here, because there is a tendency, at least on my own side, to focus very much about, okay, what is the task, what is the problem, and what is the concept that the students should develop. And learning is important, but we're also steering towards a deliverable, but also steering towards certain epistemic emotions, kind of have a much more process-oriented view of the type of learning. That I think would be a take-home message that is not too concrete, but not too abstract either.
Maybe I can just add a quick one. First, to Tasha, yes, completely agree. The way we frame emotional scaffolding is that it's always happening everywhere, but maybe not intentionally designed. But another take-home message, I think, is that we need epistemic emotions. We want the frustration because we want the students to grapple with the uncertainty. But maybe we can take away some other emotional challenges. If we can take away some of the social uncertainty and get them the safety, then it's easier for them to engage with the epistemic uncertainty. If we can take away some of the uncertainty with regard to like what frameworks they should work with, how much time they have, which classroom they should be in, if we can give them a lot of structure in those aspects that are not necessary for learning to deal with uncertainty, that it will be much easier for them to focus and deal with that.
Great. What a beautiful ending right on time there. So thank you so much, both of you, for this presentation. I know that I suspect lots of people have scheduled their day such that they need to leave promptly. So thank you so much for making the time to be here synchronously with us.